step outside while we verify your story.
Verify what story? I told you I own this hotel.
Sir,
We deal with people claiming to be owners every week. You don't look the part.
I don't look like what? Successful, professional, black enough to be taken seriously. I'm not making this about race. You're making a scene.
I'm making a scene by existing in my own property?
Daniel Peterson had transformed the failing Grandview Plaza Hotel into Atlanta's crown jewel of independent hospitality. 8 years of 18-hour days, careful renovations, and building guest loyalty had created his dream business. But Sunday evening, his casual attire and skin color made him invisible to staff who should have recognized their boss. What started as a routine property check became a viral confrontation that would reshape how the hospitality industry trains security personnel. Quick pause, I love seeing how global our community is getting. Let me know in the comments. Which part of the world are you tuning in from today? Also, if you value independent storytelling that digs deeper for the truth, please hit that subscribe button. Your support is the only way we can keep exposing these untold stories. The Grandview Plaza Hotel sits on Peachtree Street in the heart of Atlanta's bustling business district. 37 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the Georgia sky, with a lobby that speaks to old Southern elegance mixed with modern luxury. Marble floors imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers that catch the light just right, and furniture that costs more than most people's cars. It's the kind of place where Fortune 500 executives hold meetings, where celebrities stay when they're in town, where wedding receptions cost more than houses. Daniel Peterson built this empire from absolutely nothing. 38 years old, the son of a single mother who cleaned office buildings for minimum wage while he was growing up in East Atlanta. He'd watched her leave at 5 in the morning and come home at midnight. Exhausted but determined to give him opportunities she never had, Daniel had earned a business degree from Georgia State University, worked his way up through hotel management companies, learned every aspect of the hospitality industry, from housekeeping to corporate finance. 8 years ago, he'd taken the biggest risk of his life. The old Grandview Plaza was hemorrhaging money, outdated and mismanaged. Facing foreclosure, Daniel had saved every dollar for 6 years, secured loans that put his personal assets on the line, and bought the property for a fraction of its peak value. The renovation took 2 years, 18-hour days overseeing contractors, reviewing every design detail, training staff, building relationships with corporate clients. He'd lost 20 pounds from stress and living on coffee and determination, but it had worked. The Grandview Plaza Hotel was now one of Atlanta's most successful independent properties. 92% occupancy rate, corporate contracts with major companies, a reputation for service that generated guest loyalty and word-of-mouth marketing. Daniel had built something his mother could be proud of, something that would last, something that proved a black man from East Atlanta could succeed at the highest levels of business. That Sunday evening in October, Daniel was conducting one of his routine property inspections. Every weekend, either Saturday or Sunday evening, he walked through the hotel personally, not in a suit like he wore for business meetings, but in comfortable clothes so he could blend in and see how things really operated when guests thought no one important was watching. It was a practice he'd learned from mentoring relationships with other successful hoteliers. You had to see your business from the customer's perspective, not just from the executive suite. He wore dark blue jeans, a green polo shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. Casual, but clean and well-fitted. Nothing about his appearance suggested anything other than a successful professional having a quiet evening. He'd parked in the guest parking garage rather than his reserved executive spot, entered through the main lobby entrance like any visitor, and began his usual circuit of public spaces. The lobby was moderately busy for a Sunday evening. Business travelers checking in for Monday meetings. A few couples finishing dinner at the hotel restaurant. The normal mix of guests you'd expect at a high-end property. Daniel walked slowly through the seating areas, observing how staff interacted with guests, whether maintenance issues were being addressed, if the evening shift was maintaining the standards he'd established. He'd been in the lobby for about 15 minutes when he noticed someone watching him. Michael Lee, the head of security for the evening shift, was positioned near the front desk. His attention focused on Daniel rather than the general flow of guests. Michael was a 43-year-old former police officer who'd been hired 6 months earlier when the previous security supervisor left for another position. His resume had shown 8 years with the Atlanta Police Department and 3 years in private security. Good references, clean background check, professional demeanor during the interview. But Daniel had noticed something troubling over the past few months. Several complaints from black guests about being questioned or asked to show room keys when white guests in similar situations weren't approached. Nothing dramatic enough to warrant immediate termination, but a pattern that concerned Daniel enough to make mental notes. He'd planned to address it with the general manager, Victor Alvarez, the following week. As Daniel continued his inspection, moving from the lobby seating area toward the elevators, Michael Lee approached. The security guard's posture was aggressive, shoulders forward, hand near his radio. Other guests in the lobby began to notice, conversations quieting as the confrontation became visible. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you with something?" Michael's tone carried authority, mixed with suspicion. Daniel turned calmly. He'd been through situations like this before, though never in his own hotel. "Just enjoying the lobby. Beautiful evening. You've been here for quite a while. Are you a registered guest? I'm conducting a property inspection." Michael's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification and verification that you're supposed to be here." "Verification of what, exactly? You don't appear to have any official business in this lobby." Daniel felt the familiar mixture of anger and exhaustion that comes from being presumed guilty of existing while black. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't just a guest being profiled. This time, the person questioning his right to be present was his own employee, in his own building, during his own routine inspection of his own business. "I told you, I'm conducting a property inspection." "Of what property, and on whose authority?" Daniel looked around the lobby. Other guests were watching now. Dana Lee, the front desk supervisor, was looking in their direction with concern. Jessica Clark, the assistant manager, was emerging from the back office, drawn by the commotion. This was the moment that would change everything. Daniel could reveal his identity immediately, end the confrontation, discipline the security guard privately, or he could let this play out, see how far his own employees would go when they didn't recognize their boss, document the bias that was clearly operating in his hotel. He chose documentation over de-escalation. "I'm inspecting this hotel because I have every right to be here. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to provide identification and proof of your authority to inspect this property, or I'll have to ask you to leave." The lobby had gone quiet, except for the soft jazz music playing through the sound system. And Daniel Peterson realized that his routine Sunday evening inspection was about to become something much more significant. The confrontation was just beginning. Michael Lee stepped closer, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was an authoritative whisper, but carried clearly across the marble lobby. "Sir, this is your final warning. Provide identification or leave the premises immediately." Daniel remained calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. 8 years of building this business, countless evenings spent in this exact lobby reviewing operations, and his own security guard was treating him like a criminal. "I don't need to provide identification to be in a public hotel lobby. This is private property, and you're exhibiting suspicious behavior." "Suspicious behavior?" Daniel's voice carried just enough volume for nearby guests to hear clearly. "What exactly is suspicious about standing in a hotel lobby?" Michael reached for his radio. "You've been loitering for 20 minutes without any apparent legitimate purpose. You claim to be conducting an inspection, but refuse to provide credentials. I refuse to be treated like a criminal for existing in a space where I have every legal right to be." Jessica Clark, the assistant manager, approached from the front desk. She was 28 years old, had been with the hotel for 3 years, and Daniel had promoted her twice based on her attention to detail and guest service skills. She'd attended the monthly management meetings where Daniel presented operational reports. She'd participated in staff training sessions he'd personally conducted. She'd received performance bonuses he'd personally approved. But approaching him now in casual clothes, her expression showed no recognition whatsoever. "Is there a problem here?" Jessica positioned herself slightly behind Michael, presenting a united front against Daniel. This individual is claiming to be conducting a property inspection, but won't provide any identification or authorization, Michael explained. Jessica studied Daniel with obvious skepticism. I told your security guard I'm conducting an inspection. Inspection for what purpose? Are you with the health department? Fire marshal? Building inspector? Daniel felt the absurdity of the situation reaching new levels. I'm inspecting my property. Your property? Jessica's tone carried barely concealed disbelief. Sir, this hotel is owned by Peterson Hospitality Group. Exactly. You're claiming to be Daniel Peterson? I'm not claiming anything. I am Daniel Peterson. Michael and Jessica exchanged glances. Jessica's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching contempt. Mr. Peterson is a successful business executive. He doesn't wander around hotels in street clothes making vague claims about inspections. He does when he's conducting routine weekend property reviews to ensure operational standards are being maintained. Sir, Michael stepped forward again. If you're really Daniel Peterson, you should have no problem providing identification that proves it. Daniel pulled out his wallet deliberately, his movements calm but purposeful. He extracted his driver's license and held it up. Daniel Peterson, 1247 Piedmont Avenue, Atlanta, Georgia. This address is listed in the hotel's corporate records as the owner's residence. Jessica barely glanced at the license. Anyone can get fake identification. Do you have business cards? Corporate credentials? Anything that actually proves you're connected to this hotel? I have my key card to the executive offices upstairs. Criminals often have stolen or forged key cards. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. Criminals who forge corporate executive key cards to do what exactly? Inspect hotel lobbies? Malcolm Davis, a hotel guest who'd been sitting in one of the leather chairs reading on his tablet, looked up from his device. He was a regular business traveler. Stayed at the Grandview Plaza twice monthly for corporate meetings, and had seen Daniel in the lobby multiple times over the past 2 years. Always in business attire during previous encounters, but the face was unmistakable. Excuse me, Malcolm said quietly to Jessica. But isn't that actually Mr. Peterson? I've seen him here before during my business trips. Jessica turned toward Malcolm with irritation. Sir, please don't interfere with hotel security matters. I'm not interfering. I'm just saying I recognize him from previous visits. Michael stepped between Malcolm and Daniel. Sir, return to your seat. This doesn't concern you. Hotel security harassing your owner kind of concerns anyone who stays here regularly. He's not the owner, Jessica said firmly. The owner wouldn't be dressed like that, wandering around without identification or staff escort. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity about what he was witnessing. This wasn't just racial profiling. This was his own employees, people he'd hired and promoted, people whose salaries he signed off on, people who worked in a business he'd built from nothing, refusing to acknowledge his humanity, even when presented with evidence. Jessica, Daniel said quietly, you've been to management meetings where I've presented quarterly reports. You've received emails from my corporate account. You've attended staff training sessions I've personally conducted. Are you telling me you don't recognize me? I'm telling you that Daniel Peterson is a professional businessman who doesn't need to sneak around his own hotel demanding to be recognized. Sneak around? Daniel's voice carried a note of incredulity. I walked through the front door, identified myself to security when questioned, provided identification when demanded, and explained exactly what I was doing. How is any of that sneaking? You're creating a disturbance, Michael said. Multiple guests are watching this interaction. Multiple guests are watching you harass someone for the crime of existing while black. This has nothing to do with race. Daniel looked around the lobby. 3 other guests, all white, were sitting in similar areas without being questioned. One elderly man near the bar had been reading a newspaper for 30 minutes without any staff interaction. A woman by the windows was working on her laptop, taking up space with papers and belongings spread across a table, completely unbothered by security. "You see that man by the bar?" Daniel pointed. "He's been sitting there longer than I have. Are you going to question his right to be here?" Michael glanced toward the man, then back at Daniel. "He looks white. That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." Dana Lee approached from the front desk, her expression worried. She was the front desk supervisor, had worked at the hotel for 5 years, had processed hundreds of pieces of correspondence from Daniel's office. But she looked at him now, with complete non-recognition. "Jessica, is everything all right?" "Some of the guests are asking questions. We have someone claiming to be the owner who won't leave when asked." Dana studied Daniel with the same skeptical expression the others had shown. "The owner? Really?" "Really," Daniel said. "Dana, you've processed invoices I've signed. You've handled corporate correspondence from my office. You've been working here for 5 years. Dana shook her head slowly. "I've never seen you before in my life." This was the moment Daniel realized how deep the problem ran. It wasn't just Michael Lee's bias as a new employee. It wasn't just Jessica Clark's assumptions about what successful people should look like. It was a systematic inability among his own staff to see him as anything other than a threat when he wasn't wearing the uniform of corporate success. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Victor Alvarez, the general manager. Heard there's some commotion in the lobby. Everything okay?" Daniel looked at the message, then at the 3 employees surrounding him, then at the guests, watching this surreal confrontation unfold. He typed back, "Need you in the lobby immediately. Your staff is having trouble recognizing the owner." Michael reached for his radio again. "I'm calling Atlanta PD. For assistance with a trespassing situation. You're calling the police on your boss. You're not my boss." Daniel's phone rang. "Victor Alvarez." He answered on speakerphone so everyone could hear. "Daniel, what's happening down there?" The lobby went completely silent. "Daniel, what's happening down there?" Victor Alvarez's voice cut through the marble lobby like a knife. Michael Lee's face went pale. Jessica Clark's mouth opened slightly. Dana Lee stepped backward, as if physically struck. "Victor," Daniel said calmly, "your security team has been trying to remove me from my own hotel for the past 20 minutes. "What?" "I'll be right down." The elevator dinged within 90 seconds. Victor Alvarez emerged, saw Daniel standing in the center of a circle of his own employees, and immediately understood the catastrophic mistake that had occurred. He'd worked with Daniel for 6 years, had been personally hired by him, had attended countless meetings in Daniel's corporate office. "Mr. Peterson, I am so sorry." Victor's voice carried genuine horror. He turned to Michael, Jessica, and Dana with barely controlled fury. Michael's hands were shaking. We didn't. He wasn't dressed like what? Like he owns this hotel?" "Because he does." The next 48 hours unfolded with devastating swiftness. Hotel security footage revealed this wasn't Michael's first incident. Over 6 months, cameras had captured him questioning 7 black guests while ignoring similar behavior from white visitors. Jessica had been present for 3 of those encounters, never intervening. Daniel filed a civil rights lawsuit against his own hotel, naming Michael Lee, Jessica Clark, and the corporation for inadequate training and supervision. The case settled within 8 months for an undisclosed amount exceeding $2 million, with funds going to civil rights organizations focused on hospitality industry reform. Michael Lee was terminated immediately, his security license suspended pending investigation. Jessica Clark was demoted and required to complete 60 hours of bias training before returning to duties. Dana Lee received formal reprimand and additional training. The story went viral within hours. Black hotel owner, confronted by own security team, dominated social media, generating millions of views and thousands of comments from people sharing similar experiences. But the most damaging revelation came from the investigation. Internal emails showed Jessica had received previous complaints about Michael's behavior, but failed to report them to management, believing such complaints were exaggerated, and that guests were playing the race card. Malcolm Davis, the guest who'd recognized Daniel, provided a witness statement that became crucial evidence in the lawsuit. 3 other guests who'd observed the incident submitted supporting testimony about the obvious racial bias in the confrontation. Within 6 months, the Grandview Plaza Hotel had implemented comprehensive bias training for all staff, established an independent complaint review process, and created clear protocols for handling discrimination allegations. The viral video of Daniel Peterson being confronted by his own security team reached far beyond social media outrage. Within weeks, major hotel chains across the United States were examining their own training protocols, guest complaint records, and security procedures. The hospitality industry, built on the foundation of making everyone feel welcome, was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth about who they actually made feel welcome. The American Hotel and Lodging Association convened an emergency task force on discrimination in hospitality. Daniel was invited to testify, task-advise another of her task force, and his appearance before the industry panel was both measured and devastating. I built my career in this industry because I believed hospitality meant welcoming everyone, Daniel told the packed conference room. But Sunday evening in my own lobby, I learned that welcome has conditions. You're welcome if you look the part. You're welcome if you dress the role. You're welcome if your success is immediately recognizable to people who can't imagine it exists. He paused, looking around the room filled with hotel executives, many of whom had never been questioned about their right to exist in spaces they frequented. This wasn't about one security guard or one assistant manager. This was about a system that trains employees to see Black people as threats first, guests second, and owners never. My employees had seen me in business attire and recognized me as legitimate. They saw me in casual clothes and couldn't process that the same person might own the building they were standing in. The statistics that emerged from the industry investigation were staggering. A survey of major hotel chains revealed that Black guests were 3 times more likely to be questioned about their presence in hotel common areas. Security incident reports showed a disproportionate number of complaints filed against Black guests for loitering in lobbies, suspicious behavior in parking areas, and unauthorized access to amenities they'd paid to use. Marriott International announced a comprehensive review of all security protocols within 60 days. Hilton created a new position, Vice President of Inclusive Hospitality, specifically focused on eliminating discriminatory practices. Independent hotel associations began requiring bias training for security personnel as a condition of membership. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Insurance companies that provided liability coverage to hotels began requiring proof of anti-discrimination training for security staff. The financial risk of lawsuits like Daniel's had made bias a business liability that insurance actuaries couldn't ignore. Daniel used the settlement money to establish the Peterson Foundation for Hospitality, Equality, providing scholarships for Black students pursuing careers in hotel management, and funding bias training programs for established properties. The foundation's first initiative partnered with historically Black colleges and universities to create internship programs placing students in leadership tracks at major hotel chains. The Grandview Plaza Hotel became a model for industry reform. Victor Alvarez worked with civil rights organizations to develop training protocols that were adopted by hotels nationwide. Guest satisfaction scores actually improved as staff became more welcoming to diverse clientele, and the hotel's reputation for inclusive service attracted corporate clients specifically seeking vendors with demonstrated commitment to equality. 6 months after the incident, Daniel received an unexpected email from Michael Lee, the terminated security guard. It was a brief note of apology, acknowledging that his assumptions had been wrong and his behavior inexcusable. Michael had completed 40 hours of bias training at his own expense and was working with a community organization that helped formerly incarcerated individuals find employment, trying to understand how his perceptions had been shaped by years of training that taught him to see Black men as threats. Daniel didn't respond to the email immediately. He saved it, thought about it for weeks, and finally replied with a single sentence. Growth requires acknowledging the harm we've caused and doing better. The hospitality industry was slowly learning the same lesson. Creating truly welcoming spaces meant examining who felt unwelcome and why. Then changing systems, rather than expecting people to prove they belonged. Malcolm Davis, the guest who'd witnessed the entire incident, became a vocal advocate for hospitality reform. He used his corporate travel budget specifically to support hotels that demonstrated measurable progress on inclusion, and his company's travel policy began requiring vendors to provide evidence of anti-discrimination training. But perhaps the most telling change came 18 months later. Daniel was conducting another Sunday evening property inspection, this time wearing jeans and a polo shirt, when a new security guard approached him in the lobby. "Good evening, sir. I'm James, hotel security. I don't think we've met. Are you here for business or pleasure?" "I'm Daniel Peterson. I own the hotel." "Mr. Peterson, I was hoping to meet you. Thank you for everything you've done to make this a better place to work." The conversation was brief, professional, and utterly normal. No demands for identification. No assumptions about legitimacy. No questions about his right to be present. It was the kind of interaction that should have always been normal, but had required a viral confrontation, a civil rights lawsuit, and industry-wide reform to achieve. And if you believe that silence is the enemy of justice, and that the truth deserves a spotlight, then please hit that subscribe button. We are committed to uncovering these harsh realities. We are committed to standing up for the innocent, the business owners, the guests, the everyday citizens who just want to exist in public spaces without harassment. This goes beyond just one bad interaction or one viral moment. It's about deciding what kind of society we refuse to tolerate any longer.